It's really nasty, and there's wires hanging off here. Now that the front bumper is off and out of the way, you can kind of see how that mounted. And we are free. Look at that. I don't know, 15 pounds at least. And it's out. What's going on, everybody? Today we're getting back into work on the BMW. Took a couple weeks off just working on things in the garage, just not on the car. I kind of put off drywall and drywall mudding basically all summer and all drift season. So I kind of needed to take some time and tackle that. It's not completed fully just yet. I've been working on sanding, and that takes quite a bit of time to sand everything. I need to skim coat again and get that second coat of mud on some of these seams and some of the drywall screws. So you're kind of seeing a little bit, dimmer lighting in here right now. The shelves are gone from this side. A bunch of other things are cleared out of the garage because drywall mud and sanding gets everywhere. It's a mess in here. I've been trying to keep this stuff kind of dusted and clean. I just wiped everything down because it still settles a little bit even though it's been a week. I sweep like every couple of days and it's just kind of sitting in here. So it'll be a little bit before we get this fully finished, but enough of that. We're gonna get into taking some of the stuff out of the engine bay today on the BMW. In the last video, if you didn't see that, we started the weight reduction process and pulled almost 300 pounds out of the BMW interior. So if you haven't seen that, I'll link that up here so you can go watch that after this video. But we pulled out all of the seats, all of the carpet on the back side, and the headliner and so on in the back side. There's still a little bit in the front. There's some carpet in the dash, and all of the airbags have to come out of the interior. We're not going to need any of those, and most of the time for racing you don't want that in the car anyways. So as you can tell, I already have the car up on jack stands because we're going to need to go under the car to disconnect a few things to do what we're going to be doing today. But showing you the interior, kind of where we left off, it's all tore apart in the back side here. Everything underneath where the carpet and panels were is exposed. We're not going to touch any of the wiring right now because that is like the harness stuff and chassis harness. We're going to leave that alone. But basically this front quarter or front third of the car rather is still needing to be pulled out. Center console in the front half, and then the dash is all going to probably come out. But I'm not going to just destroy the dash because we're most likely going to reuse this dash, just kind of slim it down a little bit. And then, the curtain airbags are up in here. Those have to go. I've had the battery disconnected for quite some time now. I think it's been a couple of weeks. When you're doing anything with like engine and electrical stuff, make sure you disconnect that battery for safety. I don't want to have like shorts or anything in the harness or the ECU. So we're going to dig into what we're doing in the engine bay. So what we are doing today is going to try our best to get everything out of here with the engine and like right in the middle here. We're going to leave the subframe and everything in the car. Probably going to get that out of here. This is the washer fluid reservoir. We don't need that, and just get it out of the way so that we can work on the rest of the stuff. Now the head and the top end of the engine is basically all taken out of the car besides like the intake manifold. So that's going to come out. I want to say this is just basically sitting here, and it's maybe connected with some vacuum lines and so on, maybe some electrical wiring harness stuff on this side. So I got to dig into that and kind of see what's left to do with the intake manifold, get that out of the way so that we can then access everything else in here. Now the radiator is also already out of the vehicle, so I don't have to worry about taking that stuff out, and the clutch fan, that's all dismantled. That's out in my trailer. I basically stored everything in my trailer for now, just so I have things out of here. But yeah, this is all taken out. I might, for this task of pulling the engine out, see about taking the entire front clip off of the car just to make it easier to come this way. And if I need more room, I'll move the toolbox out of the way so I have all kinds of room. There's like 8 feet in front of the car to move an engine hoist around. So This shouldn't be too difficult to get out of here. It's just there's some things that need to be disconnected still. So before we go too crazy in the engine bay, I'm gonna have to go underneath the car and disconnect the drive shaft and drop the mid pipe out of the way to make room around the transmission so that we can access anything in there, and disconnect all of the harness from the transmission as well. And then we're gonna have to go inside the car and kind of disconnect the shifter linkage and everything up on the top, or the shifter. Maybe with the Miata, I have to disconnect a bunch of stuff and get stuff out of the way. We'll kind of see. I've never pulled anything apart on a BMW before, so we're gonna figure that out today. I went ahead and pulled out the headers. It is 2-piece. So basically, like, is it a 3-to-1 with a 3-to-1 that goes down to a dual down in the mid pipe, and then it eventually connects to a single exit in the back. This was just, you know, basically hanging in there with one bolt threaded into this flange, really rusty, got that out of there. And then I was just taking the plugs out of the O2 sensors. There's 4 on this car. What? That's so weird to me. The Miata has 1. There is a crack on this one. I don't know if you'll be able to even see that. There's a crack all the way around this runner. So that's gonna need to be repaired. I'll have to clean that, bring it to work and TIG it, because I don't have a TIG welder here just yet. And I will TIG that properly or weld that properly. I don't have a backbird system at work, but we'll get that welded up so it's not a big crack. I don't know, maybe I'll do that this week still. Otherwise, you know, it's not a rush. It's not going back in the car anytime soon here. So I'll just make note of that this needs to be repaired. So far with this car, oh no, it is just regular hex. That's nice. There's been a lot of stuff that I'm finding so far that's like a star bit or something similar, like on the transmission. That one there is like a weird Torx star. So I'm gonna probably need to get some more of those style tools because I know I'm gonna need them. But we gotta get the exhaust hanger out right here, and then this trans brace will eventually come out. We're not gonna do that just yet. Those bushings look like they're pretty wore out, so probably gonna have to replace those at some point. But the guibo right here looks like it's in pretty good condition still. Now this is like I don't know if you'd consider that to be a 2-piece, or it's just like got the splice in the middle. We'll have to disconnect that, and then those star bit style on the drive shaft into the front of the diff right there as well. I know I said previously or in a previous video that I want to hear what this exhaust sounds like. I don't even want to hear it at this point. That muffler back there is gotta be like 60 or 70 pounds. It is very, very heavy. Not what you want out of an exhaust. So we're gonna start back here with the axle back muffler. Very heavy. Very big chunk of whatever baffling there is in there. Very, very heavy. Not necessary. Probably not gonna ever use this again. Maybe I can cut it off and just see what it sounds like and redo the rest of this piping, because the rest of it you'll see in a second. Now, I believe this is supposed to be just like an axle back, because none of this matches, and it's a slip joint here, and they welded it instead of using a U-bolt clamp, which it's really nasty, and there's wires hanging off here. This resonator, I don't think matches the Denon. I think this is just some random resonator that was thrown in here, clearly because of the booger of a weld here with a different diameter, like adapter piece thrown in. No good. That's really bad, really bad. This exhaust hanger wasn't even holding up to anything, or there isn't even something in there that it could bolt to. So, not supposed to be there. Another slip joint. No U-bolt clamp here. Also really kind of boogered in welds. And then another one where it's a bigger diameter here to a small little elbow that's a smaller diameter. So it's changing, you know, pipe sizing or diameter throughout the exhaust system. Not ideal. And then it's welded together with some weird tab here. Again, wires hanging off. not very good welds at all. And I believe this front piece though, it matches the material on the axle back and I believe some of the header. I mean, that's stainless, but it's pieced together. Something happened where some of the stuff was replaced, I believe, or, you know, whatever exhaust shop did work on this, or if it was done in somebody's garage, wasn't very nicely done. So we're not going to use this anymore. We're not going to put this back in the car. I wanted to see what it sounded like, but at this point, this is nasty, disgusting exhaust that we're not putting back in there. Now I'm going to go back under the car and start taking the drive shaft out. I'm not going to bring the camera down there though. There's not a ton of room and space and not very good lighting for you guys to see anyways. So it's, I think, 6 bolts on the back of the transmission, and then there's the 2 bolts that hold the center of the drive shaft up in a big bushing there, and then another 6 on the front of the diff that we're going to be taking out. So that's basically it, and I'll show you guys when we get it out what that kind of looks like. And there is the drive shaft. Now I don't think that this centerpiece is factory, and I don't know that the drive shaft is either, because this is, the front half is super lightweight, and the Guibo looks like it's in good condition, but the hardware and the bolts, like this one, all 3 of these ones that's in the Guibo are ground at an angle on the inside edge here. I don't know why the nuts would be ground like that, other than something's not right and it's not meant for this vehicle. Now, 2 of the 3 other ones that connect this to the back of the transmission were loose and spinning in there freely. Not ideal. And then when you go back to the 6 in the front of the diff, all 6 of those were finger tight or finger loose. Like, I didn't even have to put a wrench on them, just spun them right out. Very greasy, very dirty. So I don't know if that maybe had something to do with it. And there's 2 bolts per keeper here, so that kind of helps distribute the pressure or the, you know, torque on the front of the diff. And yeah, they're super dirty, very greasy. Not sure why. If the, like, if this is it kind of looks like this is similar to like a CV axle where it can pop apart and there's balls with grease in here, and I'm wondering if that's what that is, if it's just like cooked burnt grease that's pushing out through the bolt holes. And I don't know of the condition of these. I'm not familiar with how this works, so I might see if that's, I'm gonna do some research and see if you could pop that apart and replace and repack that, if that's how that works. Now that we have the drive shaft out, we're gonna move up to the front and start taking some of this front bumper and front core support out of here, get the headlights out of the way. I wanna try and get as much of this in the front out of here as we can to make pulling the engine and transmission out the front that much easier. This should all basically come out of here. Maybe just a few pieces won't come out. I'm not entirely sure. I haven't had a BMW apart in the front before. The Miata, you can take basically everything out of it. I just never really have had to. So what we're gonna do for taking this apart, we're taking this out. It kind of just slides on here, and then there's 2 like flush mounted bolts that go right in here. They're like a star bit as well. They are a T50 star bit, so just make sure you gotta have some of those Torx bits. So we got the bolts out of here. We're gonna give this a little bit of a shimmy shake and get this thing off. Don't wanna go too far. We got these light harnesses still in. One of the fog lights is missing on this side, but that's not that big of a deal because the intake is over here. But depending what I do, supercharger or turbo, you know, a supercharger would typically go on the driver's side, turbocharger would go on the passenger side. So I haven't fully decided what I want to do just yet. Both options are pretty good for BMWs. Now, these headlights got quite a bit of weight to them. You know, could I upgrade or, you know, downgrade really to something smaller so it's not this giant big, you know, brick of a headlight? Because there's a bunch of stuff going on. Like there's a control panel type thing on the bottom of this one. This one was mounted to the fender on the driver's side. So this has got a lot of weight to it. Could we get something that's lighter weight so that we could eliminate a little bit of front weight off the car? Probably. But for now, we'll most likely just use these because we have them. I'm just gonna end up cleaning these because they're like a smoked lens, and I don't like that. Somebody actually did that, you know, after the fact. I don't think it's tint, it's just like a spray-on film. So that's gonna come off. Now, I still have to take out the power steering cooler lines. Like this is the cooler system that comes with the car. It's basically a line that comes through and loops right back. So for drifting or racing application, this is not big enough or sufficient enough for a power steering cooler because the system turns at a much higher RPM than just daily driving. So it would probably be best to get an actual power steering cooler, like a much better, higher quality one, but we're not to that point yet. So we're just gonna remove that. Make sure you have an oil pan or a drain pan that you can have power steering fluid drain into. Otherwise, that's gonna make a really big mess and you don't want that all over a concrete floor or whatever floor you got. Just make sure you contain that. So we're gonna do that in just a minute, but first we're gonna take this core support out because nothing else is attached to it. We got 6 13mm bolts or nuts right here, and then we got 2 10s and 2 10s on this side. So we'll zip those out real quick and this whole thing should come right off. And we are free. Look at that. Cap on this side, but not on the other side. It might be inside there. That's the core support. Core support is out of the way. Nice and free access to the engine coming out the front. That's gonna make removing this so much easier. Yes, you still have to lift it up a little bit to get it over the subframe up inside here, but that's really not that far. Maybe just like an inch that you have to lift it up, and it can pull right out the front of the engine bay. Next, I have the power steering lines draining right now. So it's basically going to, I'm gonna probably just like zip tie this up for now. And then the line from the rack down here is gonna come up the side and come out with the engine. And then I'm just gonna leave the reservoir bolted on there until we have it out. Then we can get kind of more access to the side of the engine and get that disconnected and off of there, get it out of the way. So for now, it's just kind of draining, try and get whatever fluid I can out of there. In the meantime, we're gonna take the AC compressor off of here and the tensioner for it because we're not gonna utilize this anymore. It's not gonna go back in the car. That's quite a bit of weight sitting up here. And for a race car, you don't really need it. Is it nice when you're sitting out on grid? Yes, but for the purpose of what the car is, you want every little last bit of weight off of the car. That includes the AC compressor because that's quite a bit of weight hanging on the front of the car. That's in front of the front subframe as well. So anytime you can get weight farther back into the chassis or to the center of the car, the better. So this is already a big straight 6. It's an aluminum block, so that's nice. So it's not super heavy up here, but you know, that compressor is pretty heavy. And then like power steering, I don't have power steering in the Miata, but we're gonna keep it in this vehicle because you can make some upgrades to those to work really well and to last a long time. You just have to do a little bit of digging into the power steering rack and the, you know, pump for that. But for now, we'll pull this compressor off and get things moving. So there, I believe 13mm right here. And then a little bit bigger one, I think that's a 14 right here. And then there's another one going right in here and one on the back side in here that goes into the side of the block. We're gonna take the entire mount and the bracket off of the side of the block and get the entire unit off of here. Yeah, that's good. I don't know, 15 pounds at least. And then we got the whole bracket with the tensioner on it as well. And there we go. That is the tensioner for the AC compressor. So nice and open down here now. We're getting really close to getting this engine out of here. So next step, or next part of what we're gonna be doing here, I'm gonna try and get the intake manifold off of here, which I should be able to just kind of lift it up, I think. There's some vacuum lines over here. One goes up to the brake booster up there. We need to get that disconnected. And then the harness that goes in over here, we need to get that disconnected from wherever it goes inside there. And then I think this can all just stay intact, but I might actually just pull it out just because. Just a little hose clamp down there and get this vacuum line right here disconnected. And then this one right here goes that direction. And then this is O2 sensor harness stuff that I just have tucked off to the side. I don't think that's connected to the engine right now. I think that's just back there maybe. And then this guy, I don't know where that even gets hooked up. That was already disconnected when I got the car, so not sure. The injectors, I don't know. I think there's just a few bolts hidden under here where the harness is. Yeah, so basically on each one or a couple of them, gotta take those out and I can get the fuel rail and the injectors out of here, and I'll set those in a safe place so they don't get damaged, because I don't think there's anything wrong with them. Now, whatever power adder route we decide to go with, probably gonna upgrade those anyways. But for now, we're going to get this kind of rebuilt and put in here stock and make sure everything functions, like the car functions, transmission, the diff, all that stuff. And then we'll figure out something else after that. All right, so I kind of just kept going. Forgot to hit record, that's my bad. But I got the alternator off, the power steering pump, and the reservoir and the lines out of here. I also got the intake manifold completely removed. Speaking of which, that is absolutely going to be replaced with something aftermarket, and I have to figure out something different with all the electronic stuff underneath here, because this engine harness type thing where there's all kinds of random vacuum lines has gotta go. That is no good. And especially with the intake manifold the way it is, there is no way you're going to be doing any type of or getting access to the starter at the racetrack if you have an issue with that. Just for ease of use, that design is terrible in my opinion. But yeah, we got our pile of stuff that we pulled out, and including the exhaust over there. Making really good progress right now. We'll keep plugging away at this. I think it's just the transmission mount in the back or the bracket underneath, and then maybe shifter linkages. Otherwise, just the shifter needs to come down from the trans tunnel, and then a couple of clutch lines, and then the two motor mounts up here on the subframe. And this thing should be ready to be pulled out of the chassis. So we're getting really close here. I need to get a couple things set up. I need to start getting the engine hoist moved into position, and I need to grab some of the old head studs out of the trailer so that we can kind of hook onto the block with the engine hoist to get that lifted up and out of here. So I'm gonna kind of get this situated here, and then I'll check back in a minute. And I now have the hoist hooked up in a way that I think it should come out fairly easy. I have the trans mount down there disconnected, fully unbolted, with a jack supporting back there. And then I have the shift linkage dropped loose, so it should just have to sink a little bit in the bottom and then come up in the front side and come right out. So what I have to take off still is the motor mount right here and the motor mount right there. There's two nuts holding that on, and it should be able to lift right out. I believe everything else is disconnected. So when you go to like lift an engine out, go slow, make sure everything is disconnected. Not that you accidentally rip off a electrical connector or some of the harness or a line or something. I believe I already broke a vacuum line off of this driver's side fender. That was my bad, but I'm pretty sure I could repair that and pop it out and get a new line or something put on that. So I'm not super concerned, but I have just a slight amount of tension or upward lift on this right now to where I should be able to start loosening up those motor mounts. Coming off the passenger side, but not the driver's side yet. Alright, after a little bit of finagling and grabbing a ratchet strap to help balance the engine, because it's slanted at an angle, so one side is going to be heavier when you pick it up from basically like the cylinder head bolt holes. So now I got it kind of centered on there and dropped down far enough because the jack was too high, so it wouldn't let it tip down. Now we're making some progress. And it's out. Trying to balance this a little bit, so it's not tipped so far back, if it'll do it. The other way. Kind of. This balancing thing isn't working the best, but it's getting there. We will end up taking the transmission off here too. Drop it down, unbolt that. Yeah, the front is very light. Now we're basically just hanging on this one. But yeah, there it is. It's out of the car. Now we can kind of set this off over here and take the trans off, and then I have to put together the engine stand so we can get the block bolted up so that we can do any work on it at that time. So get this thing over there, split it apart. So before I take this apart and separate it from the engine, I'm just looking up the transmission, what style or which version of this transmission it actually is. So it doesn't have a metal tag here, or it doesn't have one on the bottom either. They're not there, but there's a number printed on the passenger side of the transmission. It is a ZF. The ZF is stamped over on the other side. It's the ZF 1.053.401.148. It is the ZF S5D 320Z 5-speed manual transmission. Of course, there's a manual, shifter right there. I can only get it 5 gears with the reverse in there, I believe. Third and fourth is kind of hard to find because it's really touchy in there. The bushings are pretty wore out, so I need to replace all of those. But then on this side, there is a 226 stamped on here. When you look up what the BMW 226 is, it's a Getrag 420D or Z or something like that, but I don't believe it's that actual transmission in here. I'm leaning more towards that S5D 320Z, just because it's a 330 Ci, unless somebody would have swapped this in here or swapped a different transmission into this vehicle, which maybe because it's Denon, something maybe would have been swapped. But when you look up the two numbers together, it still comes up as this 320Z. So that's what I'm gonna assume it is for right now, unless somebody in the comments knows more about the numbers and the codes on these transmissions. It's still a pretty decent transmission. The Getrag holds a little bit more torque, I believe, but the standard one is also meant for this kind of vehicle and can be used on all-wheel drive versions as well. So these numbers I'm talking about here over on the passenger side of the engine transmission is right here. So you got the big ZF right there, and then try and get that so it's cleared. That's the number stamped right underneath on the bell housing section. But then there's also a number back here as well. It's basically the same type of print right here, except for instead of 148 here, it's a 151. That kind of refers to the different pieces or the parts on the transmission, which, you know, I believe it still came up as the same version or the same model transmission. Then you come over to the driver's side, and this is where it has the 226 stamped on here and also down here. So that's where I'm unsure of what actual model it is. I'm going to assume it's the 148 on the other side. But, you know, when you look up just E46 226 model, that's where it comes up with the Getrag version. But I don't think it's going to be that. But, you know, if it would be that, that's cool, because they made that in a 5-speed and a 6-speed. This is a 5-speed from what I can kind of tell, unless there's some sort of lockout for reverse that I'm just not finding. If you have to push down or do whatever to get it to shift into reverse, and maybe it is 6-speed, not sure. I'm not super familiar with it, and like I said, the bushings are really wore out, so it's kind of hard to tell and find, you know, 3rd, 4th, and 5th. But, you know, I never got to drive it because the head's been pulled out of it. So once we get this all kind of rebuilt, or for the most part, you know, to a stock running version, then I can test the transmission better. Before I do that, I'm going to switch out all those shifter bushings. So my next plan of attack here is to get the engine and the transmission separated here. We got all these Torx Starbit style bolts that we have to take out. There's a couple of different sizes, one of which is missing up here, so I'm going to have to figure out a replacement for that. So I'm going to drop this down a little bit and get a jack underneath the transmission side right here, but also want to try and leave this soft mat here in case it kind of falls off. The engine is bolted to the hoist, so that shouldn't go anywhere. I just have to be able to catch the transmission. The fluid is still in this because it is a sealed unit. It's not like a Miata or other transmissions where the drive shaft inserts in the back. This has like an output, like short stub shaft that goes in there. So it keeps it all sealed so you don't have to drain the fluid. I'm eventually going to drain the fluid out of this though, just to make sure that the fluid's not full of metal or something, and not that I have to take this all apart and do a rebuild or something. There we go. Not too heavy. That actually feels lighter than the Miata one. Now, is this a stock clutch or aftermarket? No, it's stamped BMW, so I'm guessing that's the original. Well, there you go. Transmission separated from the engine. Now what I'm going to do, kind of look at this, see the tag. It does say M54B30, so it is the M54B30. I just wanted to verify that, not that the engine was swapped and a different transmission, whatever. So M54B30, 3 liter, straight 6, verified on the tag right here. You don't want to damage this. Should be able to come out of here, because that's like your little spacer. Set it like that, that's the direction it goes. Now we got a 6 for an Allen key for these. Zip these off hopefully pretty easy. Alright, should be able to wiggle off here. The pressure plate looks all right. It's not like it's smoked or burnt or anything, so that's good news. Lay that down. The clutch disc itself actually looks like there's quite a bit of meat on that, which is good. Then you kind of know it hasn't been clutch kicked a ton. It's not really beat on. I mean, the one side, you know, the transmission side does look like the grooves aren't super great. You know, we're gonna replace this regardless. It doesn't matter what it looks like. We're gonna get this replaced, probably a clutch disc and pressure plate assembly, like both of them together. And then the flywheel surface looks pretty good. So that we could probably run just with an upgraded clutch. All right, so I have confirmed. Do not reuse your flywheel bolts. They are a torque to yield, which means they deform in the torque or tightening sequence so that you are not supposed to use them again. It can cause catastrophic failure if these bolts snap or be reused. They can snap and then potentially have your flywheel fly off. So do not reuse them, get new ones. They shouldn't be super expensive, but just for safety, don't reuse them. So we'll get these off, 19 millimeter, zip them off. It doesn't matter which way you do, take them off because you can't reuse them, or you shouldn't anyways. This is a big flywheel. Like, I'm gonna probably want a aftermarket Lighten flywheel. This thing's gotta be like 40 or 50 pounds. Like that's chunky, like big. Dang. Before we get this on an engine stand, I pulled the oil drain plug and probably, I don't know, 2 cups of coolant came out of it. Any type of antifreeze or coolant will always separate to the bottom of the oil pan and will come out first before oil. Don't ask me why, that's just what happens. Yeah, the drain plug, it's an aftermarket drain plug. It's got a nice magnetic peg right on the end. That was all full of like a gray metallic sludge. Clean that all off, and it's just really fine grit. Nothing too concerning down coming out of the oil right now. I did hold a fresh rag underneath that, a paper towel, whatever, and no big sludge stuff is coming out on that. There's no bearing material that I can visibly see, just looking at that. So rod bearings are most likely fine, just that there's coolant in the bottom end of the engine. So we'll want to take the pan off anyways and inspect everything. But as far as like the scratches and gouging in the cam journals and on the camshaft, that's still a little bit of a concern to me, but not too bad because I'm not seeing anything in the oil right now. Nothing's really coming out. Maybe we won't see anything until we pull the oil pan off at a later date and kind of do an inspection inside there. Check the oil pump and the pickup tube and everything too, make sure there's not something in there. Whatever wear is in the cam journals and on the cam, it's happened over time, I think, because there's not any major damage being shown right now, just from looking at the engine oil coming out. So we'll kind of do a deeper dive into this in a later video of like the tear down of the bottom end. We'll flip it over, pull the oil pan off, check everything on the inside, and give you a look of the inside of this BMW engine, not just from the top side of the pistons right here. All right, now that we got this guy set up for it, we'll maybe have to lower this ratchet strap some and try and get the engine straighter, or just tip it like that and then try and get these lined up. Whatever's going to be easier. That's not going to be easier, I don't think. It's going to be too far. Let's just drop this ratchet strap a little bit. Need my wrenches for these, so I can tighten these up. It'll be a bad day if this whole thing comes crashing down because your bolts aren't tight. Lower this down. Awesome. strap off of here. Worked pretty well. And then finally, take these bolts out of the way. Alright. Roll this hoist back. There we got an engine on an engine stand. Put this pin back in here. Just like that. The engine's standing straight up. And there you have it. The engine is all the way taken out of the 330 Ci chassis. Now the transmission's sitting over there, clutch flywheel. I need to get to building a full build list. I need to write everything down, try and figure out what's needed for this, see if the pistons are good, rods are good, all of that. You know, coming up in the near future here, we're going to be tearing this completely down. And I got a little surprise here. This green wrapped piece back here is another engine stand and another engine sitting on there as like a backup in case this one doesn't work how we are wanting it to. The main reasons for picking up that engine is basically for the head and the cams, because what came out of this has some scratches in the cam journals and the cams, so I'm not sure if they're going to be okay to run. Now, what my plan is to basically rebuild this one as is with that head, with the scratches in the cams and cam journals, because doing some research, you know, some old drag cars and stuff didn't used to have like a grooved bearing or anything, and they would intentionally create a gouge in their bearings to be able to support or hold more lubrication or oil in between, you know, the moving part and the bearing. You know, so like something like this with the scratches in the head could potentially benefit as long as we don't see a bunch of bearing material in the oil pan or anything. Still not seeing anything in the oil. Sometimes that floats in there. Sometimes you get like a glitter look or like a sparkle in your oil. Not seeing that. However, there is like power steering fluid and coolant in that pan as well. So it's hard to get like a real good vision or view of what's in that oil without sending it in and testing it, you know, and they're going to come up with a huge mixture of random stuff and junk in that oil anyways, because I use that oil pan for other vehicles. So not the best oil to get tested. So we won't know until we start taking this fully apart and see what's inside the engine. Now with the backup engine here, doing some research, a lot of people can turbo or supercharge these with stock internals and get like 400 to 500 safely for a long period of time. Now there's even cases where people will throw a ton of boost at them and make 800 to 900 on stock internals with safe fueling, the right kind of fuel, all of that, you know, E45 ethanol, whatever. And you can make good power with these with stock internals, stock bottom end. Now, am I going to try and push it like that? Not necessarily, because I want this to be reliable and kind of a buy once, cry once, build it right, and have it all done. But because we have a backup engine, I could do some experimenting and testing with this one and kind of see what I can get out of it and have this one as a backup. But we're going to tear both of them down together at a certain time here and see what that one looks like as well, because that one's kind of a mystery engine as well. Got it relatively cheap. It's stamped on the back. I can't remember if it's an E83, I believe engine code, which is like an X3 or an X5. So they came the same years, they came with the same engine, the M54B30. So the block and the head should be all the same. The oil pan, however, is different because those models did come all-wheel drive. So just looking at it, the oil pan is not the same. We're gonna have to see if this oil pan even bolts up to that bottom of the block and see, you know, if it doesn't, then we potentially just have an extra set of rods and pistons for this, and hopefully the head is in good condition. I haven't taken that apart, and we can maybe use it on this engine if the other one doesn't seem like it's gonna work. So we have a little bit of, you know, playing around with parts here, and we can kind of exchange some things if we can just build one good one out of both of the engines. We might end up doing that as well, but we'll do that in the future. But for now, we're gonna end it out there today. Thanks for watching. If you have not yet subscribed, hit that subscribe button. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for the next one.